Kazuya is an ugly, weak loser who gets the strongest girl Pandora in school to simp for him. After his sister sacrificed her life to defeat a powerful alien Nova, Kazuya decided to join her old academy to become a limiter. However, on his first day, he mistakes the baddest girl in school for his sister, and goes straight for her milk jugs while she's in the middle of a deathmatch. This caught Satellaizer off guard and she tried to get him to let go of her. But the idiot refused to listen as he snuggled further into her bosom, and unintentionally cast freezing. Her opponent Ganessa then used the chance to attack her since she was unable to move and couldn't defend herself. Back in the control room, the generals and Sister Margaret were in disbelief because the freezing that occurred came from Satellaizer. One of the generals pointed out that it was against the rules to participate in the carnival with a limiter, and when the camera zoomed in on Kazuya passed out on Satellaizer, Sister Margaret recognized him immediately. Meanwhile, the news of Satellaizer's defeat was everywhere, and when Arthur learned that Ganessa was declared the winner, he left Hiragi alone in the cafeteria to wonder who the half-baked idiot that got in Satellaizer's way was. That evening, as Chiffin and Tissy escorted Kazuya to the dorms, Chiffin scolded him for causing so much trouble on the first day of his transfer. Kazuya then asked where he could go to find Satellaizer so he could apologize to her. But Chiffin told him that unless he had a death wish, he should forget about it. She said he'd not only touched Satellaizer with his hands, but had also motorboated her, which was grounds for immediate execution. Just as she was telling him to consider getting into witness protection, a bus pulled up by the curb and Satellaizer got out. However, Chiffin hadn't noticed her, so she kept talking, and the moment Satellaizer got within earshot, Tissy pulled on Chiffin's sleeve to make her shut up. Satellaizer ignored them and continued on her way, but it seemed like Kazuya was very interested in booking a one-way ticket to the hospital emergency ward because he grabbed Satellaizer's hand to stop her. Satellaizer's mind immediately went to the past where her younger self was crying about something, so she pulled away from him in fear. Since her leg was still injured, she fell and dropped her glasses, so she began searching for it desperately. Kazuya then picked them up and placed them in her hand, but after she put them back on, she got off the ground and started walking away. Before she could get far, he grabbed her hand again and said that an apology wouldn't be enough to make up for what he had done. Satellaizer just told him not to touch her so fondly before continuing on her way, but the boneheaded boy still tried to stop her, so she pulled out her weapon and told him not to come close to her. Just then, Ganessa walked up to them and started mocking Satellaizer, so she turned to face her, but Ganessa told her to stop taking her frustration out on others. However, Satellaizer said nothing, and since Ganessa liked the sound of her voice, she kept talking about how she had taken Satellaizer's spot as the top student. She told her to either go back home and nurse her wounds until the next carnival, or find a limiter, who was dumb enough to partner with her and live happily ever after with him. As soon as Kazuya heard this, he asked Chiffin if Satellaizer had a limiter, and she told him that the bitch did not. Still, Satellaizer said nothing to Ganessa, so she challenged her to a duel, knowing full well that even though Satellaizer won, it would not matter because it wasn't the carnival. This made Chiffin remind them that fighting between Pandoras was against the rules, so Kazuya asked her to put an end to it before it started. But Tissy told him that although it was against the rules, it was very common. Ganessa then deployed her Volt weapon, known as Chains of Binding, and began attacking Satelier, who dodged every attack. Ganessa told her that dodging the chains wouldn't matter because she planned to use them to leave a scar, which would remind Satellaizer of her defeat. She then merged the chains and aimed them at Satellaizer with murderous intent, but like before, she dodged them. Annoying that she was still unharmed, Ganessa increased her attacks, but Satellaizer calmly deflected everything like a pro. Satellaizer then charged at her and slashed her multiple times with her blade before she could realize what was going on. Ganessa fell to the ground injured, and Kazuya couldn't help but be impressed by Satellaizer's skill. However, Ganessa wasn't ready to accept defeat, so she got up and activated her Pandora mode. Chiffin told her not to use it because it was meant for real battles, but Ganessa said that as far as she was concerned, she and Satellaizer were in a real battle. She then released a blast of energy, which sent Satellaizer flying, so Kazuya ran to help her, but when she realized he was touching her again, she began to blush. Realizing she was acting like a love-struck fool, Satellaizer moved away from him and started walking away until Kazuya called out to her saying she had left her weapon. Just then, Ganessa used her chains to wrap around Satellaizer's body and suspend her in the air. She then asked Satellaizer if she was trying to mock her by walking away from the fight, but she kept quiet. Seeing that things were about to get out of hand, Chiffon told Ganessa to stop the duel, but she said she would not do so until Satellizer had died. Using her chains as spinning discs, Ganessa slashed Satellizer's body without mercy, and when she was done with that, she raised Satellizer's right arm, saying she was going to cut it off to celebrate her victory. However, Kazuya went to stand between them as he told Ganessa not to be a heartless bitch who found pleasure in the sorrows of others. Ganessa walked up to him, saying he was dishonoring their battle with his loser stench, so she slapped him across the face so hard that his blood spilled, and some of it touched Satellizer's face, which made her activate her Pandora mode, surprising everyone around her. This only annoyed Ganessa further because she'd been feeling gangster since she thought she was the only one who could use it. This time around, Satellizer didn't give her the chance to blink before taking her down with one swipe of her blade. Ganessa refused to accept that she'd just lost, but at that same moment, Yumi and Elisa arrived and stopped Satellizer in her tracks. They then ordered her to deactivate the Pandora mode, just as Chiffon went to check on Kazuya. Satellizer did as she was told, and Yumi said that for participating in an unauthorized duel, she would be punished. Almost immediately, the half-plotted Ganessa started laughing, but Yumi told her that she wasn't exempted from the punishment. When Yumi looked at Kazuya, she told Elise that he looked familiar, so she told her that he was Kazuya's baby brother. Later on, Kazuya was given his dorm key card by Sister Margaret, who welcomed him to the academy and asked him to do his best as a limiter. That night, when he was unlocking his door, he saw Arthur, who was walking down the hallway talking to himself. Inside the room, Arthur introduced himself to Kazuya and told him that his room was right next door if he needed anything. After the introductions were made, Kazuya asked Arthur about Satellizer, and he told that it would be in his best interest to stay away from the maniac. He explained that Satellizer didn't trust limiters, and if he decided to pair with her, she would not hesitate to drop him. He told Kazuya that there were better Pandoras, who would treat him nicely just like his Pandora did, and even though Kazuya did not ask, Arthur told him that Ganessa was his Pandora and the winner of the just concluded carnival. As Kazuya lay in bed that night, he wondered why he had mistaken Satellizer for his sister, and made a mental note to properly apologize for what he did. The next day, Kazuya introduced himself to his class and Hireji remembered him from the confrontation between Satellizer and Ganessa, causing her to stare at him. However, the instructor noticed her intense stare and asked if she'd seen her Romeo, but she denied it. After Kazuya sat down, he scanned the class and wondered where Arthur was as he was supposed to be in that class. Meanwhile, Arthur was in the hospital taking care of Ganessa, who asked why he was with her in the hospital. Like the true lord of the Sims, Arthur told her that he had to take care of her because she needed him. Ganessa tried to act like she didn't like the attention, but the moment the dumbass opened his mouth to ask why she was in the hospital after she won the carnival, she got mad and told him to keep his stupid nose out of her business.
Emotional damage!
Later that day, at the school cafeteria, Hiragi approached Kazuya, and after they sat down to eat, she told him she'd seen him during Ganessa and Satellizer's duel. She then asked why he was trying to defend an ice queen like Satellizer, so he explained that he was the reason she lost the carnival. Just then, Arthur joined them at their table and Hiragi had to tell Kazuya to keep what he'd told her between them, seeing as Arthur was Ganessa's limiter. She also told him to stay far away from Satellizer because she was as nutty as a fruitcake. But Kazuya didn't like what she said and told her to keep her assumptions to herself. Just then, Satellizer walked into the cafeteria, and the students all ran away from her like she was the Black Plague. Kazuya, on the other hand, didn't share their opinions, so after she bought her lunch and was on her way out, he grabbed hold of her hand, shocking everyone. Satellizer immediately pulled her hand away, and even though she dropped her food, she kept walking away. But as she walked, she told herself that his touch wasn't bad. Satellizer ended up going to the roof, and Kazuya met her there so he could return her food, but she refused to take it. He then apologized for making her lose the carnival and putting her in a situation where she had to use her Pandora mode. Satellizer told him that she'd used it because he was trying to help her, and she always repaid her debts. Kazuya thanked her and said he knew she wasn't an evil witch like the other students seemed to believe. Satellizer then admitted to him that she hated when people touched her, but she didn't hate it when he did. So Kazuya used the opportunity to hold her hand again and asked her to make him her limiter, which surprised her. Meanwhile, Arthur and Hiragi, who were watching them, couldn't believe Kazuya would be bold enough to ask her to make him her limiter after all the warnings they'd given him. Oblivious to their presence, Kazuya introduced himself to Satellizer, and from the way she looked, it seemed she recognized his surname. But before she could say anything, they were interrupted. The girl who interrupted them said the rooftop wasn't a good place to do a baptism, but Kazuya didn't understand what she was talking about. So she explained that whenever a Pandora and a limiter agreed to be partners, it was known as a baptism. She told her that baptism was supposed to be done in secret, but instead of thanking her for her unwanted lecture, Kazuya asked who she was. She told him she was the release of Chastity Miyabi, but from their hiding spot, Hiragi called her a limiter eater. Hiragi explained to Arthur that she was a shameless pimp who baptized any handsome limiter she could find but changed them like clothes when she got bored. Satellizer then got up to leave, but Miyabi stopped her, saying it was rude not to acknowledge one's seniors, so Satellizer gave her a nod. Kazuya tried to go after her, but Miyabi stopped him and asked him to become her limiter instead. Kazuya felt uncomfortable because of how close she was, so he politely refused her offer, but Miyabi felt insulted. Since she deemed herself irresistible to all males, she refused to accept that Kazuya wanted nothing to do with her, so she had her 3 boy toys block his path. However, Satellizer held her weapon to Miyabi's neck and told her not to lay a finger on Kazuya. Hiragi and Arthur couldn't believe that she'd challenge a third-year student just so she could defend Kazuya. Miyabi, on the other hand, told Satellizer to know her place before picking her up and slamming her into the ground. When she summoned her daggers, Satellizer moved back and took a defensive stance. Miyabi threw the daggers at her, but Satellizer easily hit them away, and before she could react, Miyabi used the accelerating turn skill to move like the Flash and appear behind her. She then tried to stab Satellizer, but she used the same move and surprised Miyabi from behind. Miyabi moved away just in time, and the two began attacking each other head-on. But the moment Satellizer's blade nicked Miyabi's cheek, she got mad. After screaming like a banshee, saying she was going to make Satellizer taste humiliation and disgrace, she then signaled to her limiters, after which she activated the Iranbar set, allowing the limiters to cast freezing on Satellizer and Kazuya. As she approached Satellizer to deliver her final blow, Satellizer leaped into the air, which surprised her since no one should be able to move within a freezing area. However, when Satellizer noticed Kazuya was still struggling to get free, she dropped down and tried to help him, but Miyabi used the opportunity to attack and injure her. She then pulled her up by her hair and told her to apologize for injuring her face, after which she punched her, but Satellizer calmly asked her to let her take Kazuya. Miyabi responded to her request by slashing her dress and exposing her mummy milkers before sending her stupid lackeys to beat Kazuya up. She then proceeded to grope and manhandle Satellizer as she reminded her of her promise to make her feel humiliated. Kazuya begged her to stop, but she ignored him and pushed Satellizer into a downward dog position before pulling down her underwear. Miyabi decided to increase the humiliation by asking her limiters to take pictures of Satellizer in her embarrassing state so she could share them with the school. Kazuya got so angry that he broke the freezing Miyabi's limiters cast on him by casting one of his own, which surprised everyone that he could do so without an Iranbar set. Taking their stun states as an opportunity, Satellizer attacked Miyabi and her limiters, but just as she was about to finish Miyabi off, Chiffon arrived and asked her to stop. However, Satellizer ignored her and tried to carry on with her plans, just as Yumi and Elise arrived. But before they could do anything, Kazuya cast freezing on her. He begged her not to stoop to Miyabi's level and told her that Pandoras weren't meant to harm one another. Satellizer turned to look at him before putting her weapon away and standing up from Miyabi's body. Later on in the lab, Elise showed Yumi Kazuya's bioskin and told her that just like his sister, Kazuya had 20 stigmata. Yumi asked how he could mature his stigmata since he was a boy, and Elise explained that his body was built the same way his sister's body was. This made Yumi point out that the school authorities knew everything about him, but still allowed him to attend the school. She then asked if he might have known the secret about himself, but Elise said he might have had no idea. Outside, Chiffon put a plaster on Kazuya's wound and told him that since Satellizer went up against a third-year student, she would be punished. Elsewhere, a third-year Pandora named Ingrid and her limiter Leo were doing a training simulation against a type of Nova. By the time they were done and on their way out, another Pandora named Achia met her in the hallway and asked her to look after Satellizer. 1 week after Satellizer's fight with Miyabi, Yui released her from solitary confinement, but on her way to her room, she met Ingrid, who told her that she was the protector of order and she punished people like Satellizer who broke order. She told Satellizer that she would give her till the next day to find a limiter, so she could finally teach her a lesson in respect. After she walked away, Garagdi, who had heard their entire conversation, wondered if what she heard was true. Later on, she told Arthur and Kazuya what she'd overheard, and said Satellizer would be looking for him to be her limiter. Arthur agreed with her and was about to tell Kazuya to find a place to hide, but Kazuya got up and left the room. When he arrived at Satelliar's room, he went in without knocking but didn't see any signs of her. He then approached her bed and noticed she'd left her diary there, but decided against reading it. He turned away from the bed, but the urge to know what was written in the diary was strong, so he turned to pick up the book at the same time Satellizer came out of the bathroom. She was surprised to see him in her room, but when she noticed what he was about to do, she screamed and tried to go grab the book, but ended up tripping, which caused her towel to drop. Kazuya was then blessed with the sight of her pillowy plots on full display as she straddled him, but she screamed in embarrassment and dropped the book. After she'd wrapped herself in a blanket like a flu patient, Kazuya apologized, but she ignored him and asked why he was in her room. He told her that he had come for the answer to his proposal, but she said that she did not need a limiter. Kazuya argued that she needed it because of the duel she had against Ingrid the next day, but she told him that she had no need for a busybody limiter like him, and asked him to leave. Later that night, Satellizer went to challenge Ingrid in her room, and since she didn't have her limiter with her, Satellizer figured it would be easier to beat her. However, Ingrid used her like a wrecking ball to smash the wall and told her not to underestimate her because she wasn't some weak Disney princess who needed a man's help. Satellizer kicked her in the face and jumped down, but Ingrid deployed her Volt weapon and attacked her. Satellizer dodged the attacks but realized Ingrid was faster than most Pandoras she'd fought, and when Ingrid backed her into a wall, she quickly moved her head to avoid Ingrid's weapon. The impact of Ingrid's blow to the wall caused it to shake, making Kazuya and his friends wonder if it was an earthquake. As the fight continued outside, Satellizer was getting the beating of a lifetime, and when Ingrid knocked her to the ground, Kazuya rushed to the balcony to see what was going on. Ingrid asked Satellizer if she was giving up, but the bone-headed girl decided to use accelerating turn to attack her. Ingrid wasn't even fazed by this as she activated her six-path stage mode to sense Satellizer's every move and block her attack, which caused her blade to break. Satellizer jumped back immediately, but Ingrid told her that the accelerating turn was only capable of increasing the user's speed. She then activated her Tempest Turn skill, which allowed her to use the Shadow Clone Jutsu to beat the shit out of Satellizer. As she lay on the floor, Ingrid pulled her hair and asked if she was ready to surrender, but at that moment Leo called out to her, distracting her momentarily and allowing Satellizer to break free. Ingrid told her it would be foolish to continue the fight without a limiter and offered to give her some time to find one. She even asked the students who were watching from their balconies if one of them would be willing to become Satellizer's limiter, but no one spoke up. Taking their silence as a no, Ingrid prepared to attack, but Kazuya arrived at that moment and said he'd be Satellizer's limiter. Ingrid wasn't sure if he was being brave or just plain stupid, so she told him that agreeing to be Satellizer's limiter meant that he would be dragged into whatever trouble she found herself in. Kazuya told her that all he cared about was preventing Satellizer from getting a royal ass whopping, so she said she would allow them some time to do their baptism. He then approached Satellizer and asked her to give him her baptism, but she refused, saying the Arenbar set was disgusting and raunchy, and she wanted nothing to do with it. The simple-minded boy asked if the Arenbar set was a subtle way to develop plot, but a red-faced Ingrid said it wasn't. She told him it was a sacred act, after which she activated hers and allowed Leo to use freezing on them. Ingrid then tried to attack the immobile Satellizer, but Kazuya countered Leo's freezing with his, causing Ingrid to declare him a threat. When she tried to cut him down, Satellizer got between them and slashed her chest, causing Ingrid to get angrier. As the two of them clashed, Kazuya asked himself why Ingrid was so obsessed with order since that's all she kept talking about. Ganesa, who had been watching silently, explained that a year before Satellizer transferred to the school, a typist Nova had attacked an off-campus carnival for first-year students. She said that the scared first-years had broken protocol and ran away with their tails between their legs, but their platoon leader Marin had stayed to fight. By the time the support unit arrived, Marin was badly injured, so she died in Ingrid's arms. Ganesa said Ingrid believed that if the first-years hadn't broken protocol, Marin wouldn't have died. Her story was cut short when they noticed Ingrid slam Stabilizer to the ground, and Leo cast freezing on her, so Kazuya cast an omnidirectional freezing, which broke Leo's own. Ingrid screamed at Leo to quickly free her from the freezing, but before he could react, Stabilizer kneed him in the stomach and went after Ingrid. Having no other choice, Ingrid activated her Pandora mode so she could move inside the freezing area. As she approached Stabilizer, she wondered if Marin would approve of what she was doing, but quickly pushed the thought aside and said that those who trampled in order would one day abandon their comrades. Just as she was about to finish Stabilizer, Kazuya casted a stronger freezing and told her that Marin's death wasn't in vain. Ingrid told him to stop spewing rubbish from his sewer mouth since he never knew Marin, but he told her that just like Marin, his sister had died saving others. Ingrid didn't understand what he meant by that until Stabilizer explained that his sister was Kazuo Aoi. Ganessa then spoke up from her spot and told Ingrid that during the attack, Marin had told her that since the first years didn't have a limiter, it would be difficult for them to fight the Nova. She said Marin had fought the Nova so she could protect them and save as many as she could. Her words made Ingrid remember that the last thing Marin had asked her was if the girls were safe. It soon began raining, just like that night, and Ingrid realized that Marin's death hadn't been anyone's fault. As she sat there crying, Stabilizer approached Ganessa, but the snobby brat told her not to thank her, because she only did what she did so Ingrid could get closure and walked away. Stabilizer then walked towards Kazuya, who thanked her for saving his life once again. During class the next day, Yumi was lecturing on the duty of a limiter during a battle with a Nova. Hiraji couldn't help but glance in Kazuya's direction, as she wondered how he cast freezing without a baptism. After the class, she asked him about it, and he told her that he didn't know why or how he was able to cast it, but said he did it because he wanted to help Stabilizer. Hiragi then asked if Stabilizer had thanked him for saving her, and when he said she hadn't, Hiragi told him he was a fool for risking his life for her. Kazuya tried to argue, but Arthur backed her up, saying Kazuya was the dumbest simp he'd ever seen. He said Stabilizer was only using him for his abilities and wouldn't hesitate to drop him like a hot rock the moment she got tired of him. They told him he was being bewitched by her beauty and said he should remember that beautiful flowers have thorns. Just then, Stabilizer walked up to them, causing Arthur and Hiragi to fumble over their words like a broken tape recorder. She ignored them and asked Kazuya to come with her, as she had something important to say to him. On the rooftop, Stabilizer placed Kazuya's hand on her cheek and admitted that he was the first person whose touch didn't make her feel disgusted. She then told him that it was a surprising thing for him to be able to cast a freezing without an Iranbar set. Kazuya told her that he wasn't sure how it happened, but said he hadn't been able to cast it again no matter how hard he tried. To his surprise, she told him that she would make him her limiter. However, she wouldn't give him the baptism like the other Pandora, and Kazuya couldn't be happier. Meanwhile, outside the school gates, a girl dressed like she was a member of the Water Tribe got off a bus and couldn't hide her excitement at being in the school. Later that day, while Stabilizer and Kazuya had lunch, Stabilizer nervously asked him to come to her room at night and he agreed. That evening, on his way to Stabilizer's dorm, he came across the Katora Wanevi as she was trying to figure out how to get to the principal's office. When she saw him, she happily hugged him and said he was her savior, after which she told him where she was headed. On the way to the principal's office, she told him that she was a transfer student when he asked who she was. After he dropped her off, he met Hiragi and Arthur on his way back to the dorms, and as they walked together, he told them about his discussion with Stabilizer. The two were shocked by this, and Hiragi told him she was only using him for his powers, which Arthur agreed with. He then told them that she had invited him to her room, and Hiragi excitedly told him that he was about to take part in the first room entry. She explained that it was something that happened after a Pandora chose a limiter, and said that it was a way for them to strengthen their bond. Arthur told him he had done the same thing, but because he was drunk, he had no memory of it. However, they pointed out that it was strange that Stabilizer was willing to invite him into her room when everyone knew she had broken the arm of the last limiter who touched her. Listening to her made Kazuya wonder if Stabilizer was forcing herself to be with him. When they got to the dorm's entrance, Hiragi and Arthur asked Kazuya to reconsider his agreement with Stabilizer, but he told them to shove their opinions up their arses and walked away. However, before he could climb the stairs, he bumped into his second-year student, who recognized him as the boy who cast freezing without an Iranbar set. So she asked him if Stabilizer had agreed to make him her limiter, and much to Arthur and Hiragi's dismay, he said yes. He then tried to walk away, but she stopped him and told him that she and her friends were going to help him celebrate his new position. Back in the principal's office, Sister Margaret welcomed the new student and introduced her to Chiffin. The girl, whose name was Rana Lynch, thanked them for accepting her and said she couldn't wait to see what the new school would bring. Meanwhile, the three snotty mean girls decided to gang up on Kazuya, and Aragi told them to stop transferring their aggression to him. She said they were being bitchy because Satellaizer wiped the floor clean with them during the carnival. One of the girls got mad at her for interfering in their business, so she kicked Aragi and tore her dress, saying she was going to discipline her for disrespecting them. Aragi then pulled out her weapons and charged at her, but the girl avoided the attacks and slashed her. Arthur decided to get help, but the third girl stopped him and tied him up with her chains before stepping on his crotch. Aragi tried to tell her to stop, but the bitch dealing with her stepped on her too. As Kazuya watched them beat up his friends, he angrily told them to stop before using freezing on them. At that same moment, Rana, who had just gotten to the front of the dorm, felt the surge of his power. Kazuya, on the other hand, tried to approach the girls, but he fainted, which freed the girls from the freezing. His ability to cast freezing without an Orion bar set freaked them out, so the leader of the Bully Girls Club pulled out her weapon and tried to carve him up, but Rana stopped her. The girls' friends then attacked Rana, but she beat all three of them easily without breaking a sweat. Later on, Arthur went to inform Satellaizer that Kazuya was in the clinic, and when she got there, she met Rana. Arthur explained that she had been the one to save Kazuya, and Satellaizer asked where he was. Rana told him that the doctors were with him and said they could wait together. But Arthur was smart enough to sense the tension in the air, so he told Rana that Haragi wanted to see her. After they left, the doctors came out, and when Satellaizer asked them about Kazuya, they told her that he'd fainted because of exhaustion, but allowed her to see him. Meanwhile, in Haragi's room, Rana told them she was a transfer student and said she had come to look for the man of her destiny. She explained that in her hometown, women who hold the Tears of Kunlun were fated to meet the man of their destiny. When she showed them her back, they recognized the tears as stigmata. So Haragi showed her the ones she had on her back and explained that those who had them were called Pandoras. Arthur added that the man of destiny she referred to as a limiter and told her that she would be able to find one at the school. But Rana said she had already found him. She said the man of her destiny was Kazuya, but they told her it would be impossible because Kazuya was already Satellaizer's partner. The following morning, Rana was introduced to Satellaizer's class, and after she took the empty seat beside Satellaizer, she told her that Kazuya was the man of her destiny, making Satellaizer wonder what she meant by that. Later on, their class had a freestyle battle, and Ganessa, who acted like she was the next best thing after an iPhone 15,
"Are you sure about that?"
decided to show Rana what she was made of. When the battle commenced, she deployed her binding chains and attacked Rana, but Rana blocked them with her gloves. The students were surprised to see that her Volt weapons were gloves and boots. Rana then jumped in the air and tried to land a punch on Ganessa, but she moved in time, causing her shirt to rip from the impact of Rana's punch. Rana moved in for a kick, but Ganessa blocked the attack and Rana commended her for it, saying she had skill. Ganessa said she hadn't seen the best of it before willing the chains to attack Rana from different blind spots. However, Rana managed to avoid getting injured, and when Ganessa tried to attack again, she expected it, so she countered them. This gave her the chance to get closer to Ganessa, and just as she was about to deliver the final blow, the instructor stopped the match. At lunchtime, Kazuya sat with Arthur and Aragi, and they tried to talk him out of partnering with Satellaizer by telling him the story of the limiter she injured in her previous school. They said that a limiter named Brooksleven had volunteered to become Satellaizer's limiter just like him, but Satellaizer had injured him so badly that he could never fully recover or be a limiter again. Aragi told him that after the incident she was suspended for a year before she was transferred to their school, but since her enrollment, she had beaten up a limiter who accidentally touched her and even fought with other Pandoras. While Kazuya tried to take all of that information in, Rana joined them and asked how he was doing. After he told her he was fine, she began giving him some unnecessary information about her stigmata while getting closer to him. Haragi and Arthur realized what she was doing, so they came up with an excuse to leave. After they left, Rana told Kazuya that he was very special to her and told him to address her formally, which he tried to refuse but she insisted. Just then, Satellaizer arrived and found them in their compromising position, but Rana didn't seem to care as she told her that if their lovey-dovey behavior was disturbing her she could leave. Satellaizer turned away but told Kazuya she needed to speak with him about something important. Rana tried to tell her that he wasn't done with lunch, but he immediately got up and left with Satellizer. When they left, Beitia joined Ron at the table and cunningly mentioned something about Kazuya, which Rana seemed interested in. Later that day, while Rana stood outside her dorm, she remembered her conversation with Achia, who had told her that Satellizer was using Kazuya for his abilities. She said that once Satellizer was tired of him, she would cast him aside like an old shoe and go after someone else. Rana also remembered that her village chief had told her that the one who made her Kumlin's tears vibrate was the man of her destiny. So right there, and then she made up her mind to challenge Satellizer. That night, as Satellizer stepped out of the bathroom, she met Rana waiting for her, and when she asked what she wanted, Rana asked her to come with her. Rana then took Satellizer to the training room and told her to leave her future baby daddy,
What did he say?
Kazuya, alone. Satellizer said she had no right to interfere with their business, but Rana argued that since Satellizer refused to perform baptism with Kazuya, she had no claim over him. She said she was going to perform the baptism with Kazuya and become one with him, and Satellizer told her that Kazuya was already her partner. Rana then asked why she was refusing to perform the baptism with Kazuya, but Satellizer told her it was none of her business. When she tried to leave, Rana placed a hand on her shoulder and stopped her, but since Satellizer didn't like people touching her, she slapped her. However, Rana wasted no time in returning the favor and told Satellizer that since she preferred violence, they would settle things that way. Meanwhile, Kazuya had gone looking for Satellizer in her room, and when he didn't find her, he decided to leave. Outside, he overheard two girls talking about Satellizer and Rana, so he asked what they were talking about. Back in the training room, Satellizer and Rana began their gladiator match, and they agreed that whoever lost would leave Kazuya alone. As both girls fought, they didn't take note of Achia watching them from the control booth. The girls matched each other's strikes until Rana decided to up her game and use a special skill, which Achia recognized as the Wings of Light. The skill allowed Rana to land a hit on Satellizer, as long as she was in her range of sight. Satellizer realized this and tried to move away, but Rana threw another punch which allowed her to get closer to Satellizer. When she tried to use the Jed Jenkins skill she'd learned from watching Hunter x Hunter,
What?
Satellizer used acceleration to get out of the way. Rana told her that it was pointless and tried to attack her again, but Satellizer did a double acceleration and dodged the attack. Rana was momentarily stunned, so Satellizer moved in and slashed her with her blade. Rana managed to stand up and admitted that she was impressed with Satellizer's ability. Satellizer then charged at her at the same time. She threw another punch, but Satellizer's blade pierced through Rana's shoulder. However, Satellizer didn't know she'd walked into Rana's trap until she unleashed her ultimate move called Enga and took her down. Rana then turned to leave, but Satarilla got back up and told her that she wasn't going to lose to her. Just as they were about to begin round 2 of the Mortal Kombat, Kazuya arrived and asked why they were trying to murder one another. Kazuya then told Rana that he was already Satellizer's partner, so he couldn't be with her. She argued that Satellizer was only using him for his ability, and begged him to pair up with her. But Kazuya had explained that he had been the one to propose a partnership with Satellizer. The next moment, Achia arrived with Arnett and Creo, and said everything would have gone according to plan if it wasn't for the meddling Kazuya. Rana was surprised to hear this, and Achia admitted that she had deceived her so she could teach Satellizer a lesson for everything she'd done to the third-year students. Satellizer then told her not to be a coward and said she was willing to take her on, causing Kazuya to protest, but she told him it was her fight. Achia accepted the challenge but asked her to pick an opponent between Arnett and Creo, proving that she was a weak-ass bitch who only knew how to stir up trouble. Satellizer said she didn't have to pick one person and asked both girls to come at her, which Arnett was more than happy to do, but Creo pointed out that it would be unfair to tag team an injured person. Arnett called her a killjoy and said she'd gladly do it alone, but Rana told them that she would team up with Satellizer so she could get revenge for what they did to her. Kazuya got between them and tried to talk Satellizer and Rana out of fighting, but Arnett knocked him out. Satellizer didn't bother waiting to listen to the reason she did it and punched her in the face before trying to cut her with her blade, but Arnett dodged her attacks. Arnett then deployed her Grim Reaper scythe, and as Rana watched them, she concluded that Satellizer truly cared for Kazuya. Just then, Arnett attacked Satellizer, but she moved so fast that Satellizer didn't even realize it until she'd been injured. Creo then deployed her gloves and began throwing punches at Rana, who was lucky enough to dodge them. When she tried throwing a punch of her own, Creo countered it before activating Tempest's turn, which she used to take her down. Meanwhile, Arnett and Satellizer were going at it on the other side of the room, and Satellizer had a hard time knowing which direction Arnett's attacks were coming from. After sustaining some cuts from Arnett, Satellizer fell to the floor, and Arnett explained that Satellizer had been attacking her after images because she'd been using double acceleration from the beginning. She also asked Satellizer if she was willing to give up, but she got up and said she wasn't going to lose to a Harley Quinn wannabe.
Bruh.
Satellizer then activated her acceleration and charged at Arnett again, but she still wasn't able to keep up with her pace and ended up getting cut multiple times. Once again, Arnett asked her to throw in the towel, but she refused, so Arnett slit her throat. As she lay on the floor, Asha walked up to her and said that she apologized to them, they would take her to the clinic. Satellizer told her that she'd rather die than accept defeat, which annoyed Asha, so she ordered Arnett and Creo to pull out Satellizer's stigmata and destroy them. Creo pointed out that the shock of removing them could cause brain damage, and Arnett said they could get expelled for doing so. Atia told them that she didn't care about the punishment because restoring their pride was more important. While they were arguing, Satellizer's mind was drawn to the past where she and her mother had arrived at her father's home, but his wife made it known that she would never accept them. After the cold reception from the lady of the house, Satellizer's elder sister Violet introduced herself and her brother, Louis, to Satellizer. Sometime later, Violet found Louis treating Satellizer like a horse, and when she scolded him for it, he told her that their mother had permitted him to treat her however he wanted. Violet was in disbelief, so she went to confront her mother, but the vile woman said she was foolish for taking the side of a gold-digging scum. That night, Louis went to Satellizer's room and told her that if she didn't do as he said, he would make sure that both she and her mother were thrown out of the house. Weeks passed, and Satellizer asked her mother if they could go live elsewhere because Louis had been touching her inappropriately. Her mother told her to have more patience because if they left the house and something happened to her, there would be no one to look after Satellizer. Years passed and Louis continued harassing Satellizer until the day Violet found him and gave him a dirty slap. After that day, Violet suggested Satellizer leave the house, and one day while she was in school, she was informed that her mother's illness had gotten worse. Satellizer rushed to her mother's side, and with her last breath, her mother told her to live her life proudly and never lose to anyone. Back in the present, Satellizer got up and told the three surprised girls before her that she would never lose to anyone before she activated the Wings of Light and attacked Arnett. Rana got up too and went after Creo, and as they fought, Atia wondered what kind of mutants they were up against. Arnett tried to keep up with Satellizer's new speed, but she didn't give her a chance to fight back and took her down. Rana also used the Wings of Light to take Creo down, even though it affected her afterwards. Atia then tried to avenge her fallen comrades, but they told her that they would handle things. As the girls prepared to go on for the final match of the Royal Rumble, Chiffon arrived and told them to call it off. However, Arnett refused to listen and charged at Satellizer, but Tissy got in the way before she could get to her. Arnett jumped back but still refused to back down, so Chiffon intervened and knocked her out. Finally, the duel ended and Chiffon asked Satellizer to take Kazuya to the clinic, which she did. Later on, Chiffon met Elizabeth at the swimming pool and suggested that they accept their defeat. She said Satellizer had proven that she was a force to be reckoned with, so it was best to leave her alone. Later on, Kazuya woke up in the school clinic and he apologized to Satellizer and Rana for recklessly running into their fight. Satellizer scolded him for putting himself in danger, but Lana defended him, saying he'd done it to protect her. Annoyed, Satellizer walked out of the room, giving Rana the chance to speak with Kazuya alone. She told him that she liked how brave he was and said she'd wait until the day he accepted her as his partner. Some days later during lunch, Hiragi and Arthur told Kazuya about the Academy's prom. They explained that it was an event where Pandoras who had limiters spent some time dancing the night away, while those who are yet to find one use it as an opportunity to find suitable partners to make their limiters. However, the main attraction of the event was the Pandora Queen, and they told him that the winner of last year's competition was a third year named Elizabeth. As though she could hear them, Elizabeth turned to look at their table and smiled at Kazuya when she noticed him staring at her before walking away. Arthur then teased Kazuya for having wondering eyes when he was already with Satellizer, and Hiragi asked how things were going in paradise. Kazuya told them all was well, even though things had been awkward with Satellizer since the night of the fight. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had gone to the swimming pool, and Achia protested when she told them she was ending the crusade against Satellaizer. Elizabeth explained that both Satellaizer and Rana had wiped the floor clean with Barnett and Creo, so there was no denying that the third years were weak compared to them. As she floated in the pool, Achia told the others that even though she wasn't going to fight Satellaizer, she would at least teach her a lesson. Back in the cafeteria, Satellaizer was on her way to apologize to Kazuya for how she reacted the other night, but before she reached his table, she saw Rana asking him to the prom. Before Kazuya could respond to her, Satellaizer walked up to them, so Viragi and Arthur came up with excuses to leave the table. After they left, Satellaizer told Rana that Kazuya would go to the dance with her, but Rana insisted that she hadn't asked him, so she had no right to call dibs. Kazuya begged them not to get into a fight as they faced off in a staring contest, and Rana assured him that she wasn't as uncivilized as the muscle-headed Satellaizer, so there was no need to worry. He then stepped between them and told Rana that he couldn't be her date because he was already planning to ask Satellaizer in the first place. Rana accepted it as her defeat but said she wouldn't give up on him before she kissed his cheek and walked away. Satellaizer was so jealous she couldn't stay, so she told Kazuya to pick her up from her room and walked away too. On the night of the prom, Satellaizer had just put on her dress when Kazuya had knocked on her door. She quickly made her way to the door to open it, but accidentally stepped on her dress and fell chest first on top of him. The two never-been-laid virgins blushed so hard, but the moment they realized Kazuya was groping a large melon, they jumped apart. Just then, the spiteful Achia approached them and told Satellaizer that her unsanctioned hazing had been suspended. However, since she hated the idea of losing to her, she challenged her to a duel. Kazuya immediately got between them, saying there was no way he would allow Satellaizer to get into another fight. But Attila told him not to jump the gun and said that she didn't intend to get physical with Satellaizer. She told Satellaizer that she wanted her to join the Pandora Queen contest and battle her for votes, after which she took off her uniform to reveal the skimpy outfit she wore underneath it. She said if Satellaizer refused, she'd be the loser of the duel, so Satellaizer agreed because she had no plans of losing any duel. As she spoke, her plots bounced and the mid-plotted Achia clutched her chest, saying having big jugs didn't mean she'd win. The contest soon began, and the other Pandoras went on stage to strut their stuff. While they were backstage, Satellaizer admitted to Kazuya that she was scared of participating. Just as Kazuya told her that she couldn't back out because she'd already signed up for the contest, they noticed Rana in a very revealing outfit that did nothing to hold her plots. After she did a little twirl for Kazuya, he explained the situation to Satellaizer and Attila. Just then, Achia arrived and started teasing Satellaizer, but Rana told her not to feel like she'd won, causing her to feel insecure when she noticed what Rana was packing. The next moment, Attila was called up and after her was Rana, who gave Satellaizer some words of encouragement before she went on stage. When it was Satellaizer's turn and her name was called, the students were surprised to see that the Woman of Steel would enter such a contest. As she stood on the stage, Achia's limiter told him that there was no way she'd win because she wasn't doing any poses, but for some reason the male students seemed to love her innocent and fragile behavior, so they screamed their lungs out. Satellaizer immediately ran off stage, saying how embarrassed she was, but Kazuya assured her that she had done well. The contest ended with Elizabeth, after which the students danced, and as Satellaizer and Kazuya danced, he told her he was proud of how she didn't back down. Satellaizer felt shy, but when she tried to ask him a question, the MC announced that the results were in. The person in 5th position was Miyabi, but they discovered some foul play, so she was disqualified and Ganesa was given her spot. Rana came in 4th, Achio was 3rd, and Elizabeth came in 2nd, which was a surprise. However, the most shocking part of the night was when Satellaizer was announced as the winner. While the students gathered around her to congratulate her, the underdeveloped Lawly Attila went to speak with some girls. She gave them an outfit and said that Elizabeth had intended to wear it when she was declared the winner, but since she lost, she wanted Satellaizer to wear it. So the girls pulled Satelier backstage to help her with the outfit. The moment Satellaizer stepped on stage, the students were surprised by the so-called outfit, and Achia's friends asked if she was behind it. She told them that she was and said that the material reacted to body heat. So, bit by bit, the colors disappeared, and it became transparent. She then began laughing like an old witch, but her friends didn't seem to understand why she was so proud of a stupid prank. Meanwhile, as Satellaizer was clutching her knees to herself in embarrassment, she called out to Kazuya to help her, so he cast freezing on everyone and together they ran off. Days later, Kazuya watched as a green-haired girl performed a quadruple acceleration to take down 2 novas in a simulation training. After the simulation ended, Sister Margaret told him that the girl was the top-ranked 3rd year, and her name was Kathy Lockhart. Outside the simulation room, Kazuya thanked Kathy for inviting him to watch her train at the East Genetics Academy. When Kathy thanked him for accepting her invitation, he told her that she was his senior so she didn't have to speak to him with respect. Sister Margaret then explained that Kathy was one of the Pandoras who received his sister's stigmata after she died. Kathy said she wanted to pay her respects to him, and he told her that she didn't have to, but said her skill had been impressive. He gushed about how she had taken down the 2 novas at once, but the instructor told him that it could only happen in a training situation. She said there had never been cases where more than 1 nova had shown up at once, making him feel like a stupid idiot. Kathy decided to change topics and told him that she was planning on retiring because she wanted to become a novelist, so she planned to give her stigmata to someone worthy. Kazuya then told her that her dream was a beautiful one and said he would get the chance to read one of her books someday, which made her happy. After Kazuya and Sister Margaret left, Melina, Kathy's instructor, told her that she had hoped she would lead a unit on Pandora someday. Kathy told her that she was unworthy of leading the Pandora because she lacked the strength of a true Pandora. She said that her fight with Satellizer a few years ago had taught her that she was a coward. Inside the helicopter, Kazuya asked if anyone else had received his sister's stigmata, and Sister Margaret told him that Satellizer was one of them. She then asked if he was serious about becoming Satellizer's limiter, and he told her that although she hadn't baptized him, they had agreed to be partners. Sister Margaret admitted she had been worried because of the incident with Brooke, but said that Brooke admitted he had tried to force Satellizer to pair with him, which was why she beat him up. She also said that if Kathy hadn't shown up when she did, Brooke would have been history. Back in East Genetics, Melina told Kathy that the only reason Satellizer received Kazuya's stigmata was because of her family's influence, so there was no reason to be scared of her. But Kathy told her that when she fought Satellizer and beat her, Satellizer never backed down, which made her realize that they were both fighting for different reasons. She said Satellizer's will and determination not to lose had made her lose her, never because she wasn't the same. Just then, an alarm went off, and when the students gathered at the auditorium, their instructors showed them live footage of 4 Titus Novas. From the control center in West Genetics Academy, Sister Margaret and Yumi watched as the Nova destroyed the units sent to take them out. Back in East Genetics, Melina received a call from the general headquarters, ordering the mobilization of all the Pandoras and their limiters. At West Genetics, Arthur and Aragi met Kazuya on their way to the dorm, and Aragi asked if it would be possible for the Novas to make their way to the west. Arthur said he wished they would come, so he and Ganessa would show them what they were made of. Aragi told him not to be stupid as she pointed out that Ganessa was a second-year student and there was no way she would get mobilized to fight. Arthur argued that it was possible because all the students in East Genetics had been mobilized, causing Kazuya to worry about Kathy's safety. Meanwhile, Kathy's unit had finally arrived at the location of the Novas, and their platoon leader ordered that they surround the Nova and wait for her signal. So when everyone was in place, she ordered those acting as decoys to distract the Nova. This allowed the limiters to cast freezing and stop the Nova in its tracks, after which the Strikers team attacked it and broke its core shield. The leader then ordered Kathy to deliver the finishing blow and destroy the core, so she used her quadruple acceleration and charged at the exposed core. What she didn't realize was that the Nova had timed her movements and knew the exact moment to slap her out of the way. The leader then ordered the decoys to attack again, but they received word from the control center that they had picked up a high energy frequency from the core. Before they could say Jack Robinson, the Nova released a powerful beam, which destroyed everything in its path. Following the unexpected development, Sister Margaret was informed that the headquarters had ordered the mobilization of the 4th years in West Genetics. Meanwhile, Satellizer stared out the cafeteria window as she watched the helicopters carrying the 4th years fly off. Rana soon joined her and asked why everyone was acting like they were at a funeral. Satellizer just bumped shoulders with her and walked away, causing her to ask what crawled up her ass. Chiffin, who was nearby, explained that Satellizer was acting that way because she was frustrated that she couldn't do anything in their current state of emergency. However, the clueless New had no idea what she meant, so Chiffin asked if she knew what was currently going on, and she said she didn't. Outside, Satellizer overheard Kazuya speaking with Haragi and Arthur, so she hid behind a wall and listened to what they were talking about. From her spot, she heard Arthur ask Kazuya what he would do if the headquarters ordered the mobilization of the second years. Kazuya told them he would go along with Satalizer and help her fight because she was special to him. His friends asked what he meant by that, so he explained that when he first arrived, he had mistaken Satalizer for his sister. He said he didn't know why he had done so before, but now that he learned she had 6 of his sister's stigmata, he understood why. His friends then asked if the reason he insisted on being Satalizer's limiter was because she was like his sister, and he said yes. Hearing his confession shocked Satalizer, so she left in a hurry. However, she dropped the burgers she bought, and once Kazuya saw them, he knew she'd heard what he said. Back on the battlefield, Kathy stood frozen in fear as she watched her comrades scream and die in pain. And before she could react, the Nova used its tentacles to grab her. In the control center, they watched as the Nova fused with her stigmata and absorbed her into its body along with other Pandoras, even though she tried to break free by using her quadruple acceleration. Yumi and Elise were shocked by what they had just witnessed and said the Novas were acting differently from what they were used to. Suddenly, an alert came in, informing them that the Novas had vanished and weren't showing up on their scanners. Meanwhile, Satalizer was taking a shower and replaying Kazuya's words in her head when the alarms went off around the school. Back at the control center, Yumi immediately gave the order for the 4th years to return, but Elise pointed out that they might not make it back in time. Sister Margaret then theorizes that the Novas had used the East as a decoy and said their main objective had been the West. Yumi then asked her to give them the order to mobilize, which she did, so a level 1 alert went out across the school, informing the Pandoras and Limiters to suit up and head to the auditorium. At the auditorium, Yumi informed them that since they couldn't wait for the 4th years who went to the East, they would reassemble all platoons with the remaining 4th years. She said that the 3rd years were to act as their defense and guard the gates, while the 2nd years would be on standby until further notice. After the briefing, Satalizer stayed behind, so Kazuya came to ask her to come to the waiting room, but she told him she was going to battle the Nova. He then said he'd go with her, but she told him that she didn't need him, so Rana, who had just walked in, said she'd take him instead. She told Satalizer that rejecting Kazuya meant she was accepting defeat, but Satalizer turned to face her and said she would not be beaten by anyone. Rana told her to prove it as she began to circle her and equipped her Volt weapon. Satalizer did the same, and as they were about to attack one another, Kazuya got between them and asked them to stop acting like immature brats. Meanwhile, Yumi and Elise had taken the available 4th years and gone to engage the Novas. But when Elise's team arrived at their location, they noticed the Nova's body doing something strange. A closer look revealed that it was pushing out the Pandoras it had fused within the East. When the Pandoras stood up, they noticed they all had large stigmata on their chests and backs, and Sister Margaret referred to it as the Nova form. The enemy Pandoras then used acceleration to head towards the school, so Elise ordered her platoon to go after them and ensure they didn't reach the school gates, while she stayed behind to fight the Nova. On the other side of the city, Yumi's team was fighting their Nova, when information reached her that enemy Pandoras were heading to the school and Elise was fighting the Nova alone. This was why when her strikers broke the Nova's core shield, she decided to destroy it quickly so she could go help Elise. Meanwhile, Miyabi, who was guarding the East Gate with other 3rd years, complained about how she'd been reduced to guard duty. 2 other Pandoras whispered to themselves, saying she was just being a whiny bitch. The next moment, the enemy Pandora lasered through the gate and broke into the school premises, so Sister Margaret ordered the remaining 3rd years to head there. After hearing the order for the 3rd years to move to the East Gate, Satalizer and Rana ran off even though Kazuya told them not to. Back at the gate, the enemy Pandoras ignore Miyabi and the others and begin heading inside the campus, so she tries to stop them. However, Kathy countered her attack with a powerful beam which took all the Pandoras and their limiters out. As they tracked the enemy Pandoras from the command center, they discovered that they were headed to the Ravensborn nucleochede, so Sister Margaret immediately ordered the high-ranking 3rd years to head there. Elsewhere, Kazuya asked Satalizer why she was acting cold towards him, and she told him that she didn't want to be his sister's replacement. She said he only chose her as his partner because she had his sister's stigmata implanted in her. Kazuya tried to explain what he meant by his statement, but he was interrupted by a radio transmission, asking Satalizer, Ganesa, and Rana to head to the Ravensborn nucleochede, so they took off running. When they arrived, Sister Margaret took them to the sub-basement and told them that if the third years failed to hold the enemy back, they had to protect the place with their lives. Kazuya asked what it was that they were protecting, and she said it was the holy remains before going into the room. Inside the room was a female body which was being kept in a glass tube, and Sister Margaret called her Maria Lancelot. Outside the door, Satellizer explained that the holy remains were the body of the person who gave birth to Pandoras. Back inside the room, Sister Margaret said the stigmata that was infused into the human body was made up of the same material as the Nova's core. This is why Pandoras have a high chance of reverting to Nova form, and it had happened to Kazuya, which was why they limited the number of people who received the stigmata. Meanwhile, the enemy Pandoras had finally broken into the Ravensborn, so the Pandoras in the control center strategically locked the building to trap them in a particular corridor. Once they were sealed off, they filled the room with non-lethal gas in an attempt to neutralize them, but they used the same beam that the Nova had used in the east to destroy the barrier and continue their mission. Back in the city, Elise was fighting for her life against the Nova, who was trying to absorb her as it did to Kathy and the others. Fortunately, Jung arrived just in time to give her the support she needed, so together they continued the fight. From the control center, the Pandoras continued rerouting the enemy Pandora to level 8, where Ingrid, Atia, Creo, and Arnett were waiting to take them on. Sister Margaret then sent out a transmission asking all the Pandoras to do their best to make sure that the enemy Pandoras didn't get the holy remains. She said they hadn't finished their research on it, and allowing the Nova to take it would mean they lose the war. Soon enough, the enemy Pandoras arrived at the place where Ingrid and the others were waiting for them. However, they zoomed past them using acceleration, so the limiters cast freezing to hold them in place. The enemy Pandoras then used their stigmata to counter the freezing the same way a Nova would, so the Pandoras had to engage them. Kathy and Melina found a way to zoom past them, so Ingrid tried to go after them. But Sister Margaret told them to focus on keeping the Pandoras they were fighting at bay. Instead, those in the control center made sure the path Kathy and Melina took led them straight to Elizabeth. Kathy tried to cast freezing, but Elizabeth's limiter countered it, allowing her to shoot at the stigmata on Melina's chest. The blast broke the stigmata and Melina reverted to her human form. Elizabeth then informed the others that destroying the stigmata would return them to normal, so they did as she'd said. Kathy was the only one left, but before Elizabeth could engage her, she drilled through the floor and went straight to the room where Kazuya and the others were. She immediately stabbed Rana's shoulder, pinning her to the wall. So when turned to face Kazuya and Satellizer, they were surprised to see her. Kathy then began retracting her hand, bringing Rana closer to her, but Rana deployed her gloves and sent her flying. Yet Kathy got back up and charged at them using acceleration, so Rana and Satellizer did the same. Since Ganessa couldn't use acceleration, she tried to catch Kathy with her chains. Unfortunately, that drew Kathy's attention to her, and she tried to stab her, but Rana caught the blade. She then told Ganessa to fall back because her inability to use acceleration could cost them the battle. The next moment, Kathy cast freezing on them, but Kazuya had countered and freed them from her freezing. Still, she supercharged her stigmata, which allowed her to move and head in Kazuya's direction, but before she could reach him, Satellizer got in the way. Kathy punched her out of the way, and when Kazuya tried to help her, she told him she didn't need him. She also said Kathy was an opponent she needed to face alone, so she charged at her using acceleration. The only problem was that she had underestimated Kathy's speed, and since she wasn't able to keep up, Kathy slashed her multiple times. Kathy then tried to walk away, but Satellizer grabbed her foot, so Kathy stabbed her in the back, which resulted in her fairy wings activating. Satellizer then moved with lightning speed, broke the stigmata on her chest, and sent her flying into a wall. From where she lay, Kathy started speaking, but before they could figure out what she was saying, her stigmata glowed and she screamed before getting up. Satellizer knew that if she didn't take her out soon, she would not be able to stop her once the effects of her wings of light were off. The two of them charged at each other, and for every acceleration turn Satellizer used, Kathy doubled hers. The result was Satellizer getting beat to a pulp, until Kathy pinned her to the wall with a blade through her shoulder. She then tried to take Satellizer's head, but Kazuya cast freezing at that moment, and begged Kathy to try and remember her promise. His words seemed to work because she had a flashback of him telling her that he would love to read her book someday, but her stigmata began glowing again and tried to counter Kazuya's freezing. Kazuya pushed back with all he had and began to bleed, so Satellizer screamed at him to stop, but he refused, saying he wanted to protect her. Hearing him say this made Satellizer realize that she was wrong to think he wanted her as a substitute for his sister. She finally came to terms with the fact that he wanted her as his partner regardless of whether she had his sister's stigmata or not, so she vowed to give him a baptism after the fight was over. Kathy screamed in pain once more, and the force of her freezing sent Kazuya flying into a wall before she turned her attention to Satellizer and tried to stab her. But Kathy willed her body to stop, and as she began resisting the stigmata, she begged Satellizer to put her out of her misery. The stigmata only glowed brighter, causing her to scream in pain until eventually she disappeared like the great Houdini. Just kidding. Back on level 8, Ingrid and the others found an injured Elizabeth, and she explained that Melina had managed to escape her. At the same moment, Sister Margaret was informed that Melina had gotten to the Holy Remains. However, Chiffon and Tissy were already there waiting for her, because they were the last line of defense to protect the Holy Remains. Now what happened to Kathy was that as she screamed in pain, her stigmata glowed brighter and released a powerful blast, which made Satellizer wonder if this was how the dinosaurs went out. Before she could say her final prayers, Ganessa jumped in front of her and caught the grenade just like Bruno Mars said he would. Well, since there wasn't a grenade, Ganessa took the blast head-on. When the smoke cleared up, Satellizer watched as the medium rear Ganessa's arm fell off her body along with a big chunk of her side. Ganessa then asked Satellizer if she was okay before she coughed up blood and fell to the floor. Arthur immediately rushed to her side and asked why she'd acted like Superman and taken the hit. She told him that as a Pandora, it was her duty to protect others, so he put her on his back and begged her to hang on while he took her to the clinic. He'd even taken a step when he fell and dropped her in the process, but he apologized to her and picked her up bridal style before asking her to respond to him. Kazuya told him that she was gone, but he refused to believe it as he clung to her body and cried. Just then, Kathy tried to attack Arthur from behind, but Satellizer got in her way, so she jumped back. Satellizer then said that even though Ganessa wasn't her friend, she couldn't help but feel angry. So the next moment, there was a burst of energy from her as she activated her Nova mode. Kathy decided to ignore the laws of anime and tried to attack her mid-power up, but Satellizer sensed her coming and blocked the attack. Kathy had to activate her quadruple acceleration before attacking again, but Satellizer countered her attacks with her quadruple acceleration. She then practiced her butchering skills on Kathy by slicing her arms free from her body, after which she slammed her to the floor and pulled out her heart. Sorry, stigmata. With the stigmata removed, Kathy regained control of her senses and begs Satellizer to take her life, which she was more than happy to do. But Kazuya hugged her from behind as he begged her to stop. He told her that Kathy was their friend and she didn't need to get rid of her. Just when it looked like his words had gotten to her, she tried to attack Kathy again, so Kazuya held onto her tightly until she dropped the blade and snapped out of her murderous rage. As she turned to look at Kazuya, Ganessa started moving again, so Arthur asked Kazuya for help. While they tended to her, Kathy asked Satellizer why she hadn't terminated her, and she told her it was because she didn't want to take away Kazuya's hope. The next moment, Elizabeth and the others arrived, and Elizabeth said everything was over, just as the control center announced that all the enemy Pandoras had been neutralized. Sister Margaret then asked about the situation of the Novas, and they told her that there was only one left, but half of its core had already been destroyed. However, before Elise and Yumi could attack, the Nova vanished before their very eyes, and while the control center scanned the area for it, Chiffon noticed that the stigmata on Melina's chest was glowing. The moment she tried radioing the control center to ask if the Novas were still alive, the missing Nova appeared before them. Satellizer and others ran into the room where the Nova had appeared, and Sister Margaret told them to make sure he didn't get the Holy Remains. The girls then geared up to fight, but the stigmata Satellizer was holding in her hand began to fuse with her. She screamed in pain, so Kazuya ran to check on her, and that's when he realized what was happening. Her body soon entered Nova mode and cast freezing, which stopped the other girls in their tracks. The Nova used the chance to try and take the Holy Remains, but all the girls except for Rana activated their Pandora mode so they could walk inside the freezing area. Unfortunately, Satellizer's freezing was so powerful that it canceled their Pandora modes and left them immobile once again. Meanwhile, Satellizer was trapped inside her mind, begging for help from anyone, and the moment she called out to Kazuya, he cast a freezing to counter hers, after which he told her he believed in her. The trapped Satellizer heard his voice and tried to run towards it, but she stopped when she saw Kazuya. Kazuya told her to use the stigmata's power to protect those she cared about, and at that moment, the wings of light appeared on her back. After which the stigmata the Nova was using to control her broke into pieces, and she was set free. The Nova noticed this, but Kazuya immediately cast freezing on it, allowing the girls to weaken it. Satellizer then delivered the final blow by destroying its core with her blade, thereby saving everyone. With the Nova gone, Kazuya went to check on Satellizer, and she told him she had seen his sister. When she tried getting up, she fell on top of Kazuya, so she thanked him for helping her. But she soon realized she was naked, and got shy just as the idiot Kazuya began bleeding from his nose. Days later, Kazuya and sister Margaret bid farewell to Kathy and Melina, and as the helicopter flew away, Kathy told Melina that she was going to join the Chevalier's reserves. Melina asked if she was going to give up her dreams of becoming a novelist, and she told her that she would also achieve it. Back in the West Genetics Academy, Rana, Haradi, and Kazuya paid a visit to Knesset in the clinic, and they were surprised to see Satellizer there. When they came in, she began feeling awkward, so she dropped her flowers and left in a hurry. Later on, Sister Margaret made a call to a scientist named Jengo Awoy, and after ending the call, he said it was only the beginning. What do you think the Novas need the holy remains for? Do you think Jengo knows something about it? If you've gotten this far and liked the video, let us know by commenting Yumi-sensei. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.